Hello and welcome back to Bookish. Today I wanted to do a review of Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neal Hurston. Their Eyes Were Watching God is a novel which essentially tells the story of Janie, an African-American young woman living in the segregated South, maybe 2 generations after the Civil War, and her struggles to find love and happiness and fulfillment in the South. I think one of the more interesting things about Their Eyes Were Watching God is that while segregation and racism certainly play their role, this really is a story about African American women in the African American community and the struggles they have against limitations and expectations within that community. So Zora Neal Hurston is a new author for me. I've heard about her, known about her for a long period of time, but had never gotten around to reading one of her books, and I really feel bad about that, to be honest with you, because I thought Their Eyes Were Watching God was just so good and so powerful. Zora Neal Hurston, she first kind of burst on the scene as an author during the Harlem Renaissance around 1925, when I believe a story and a play that she wrote gained a lot of attention. And she kind of went on in that vein for a while. She didn't complete her college education. I believe she graduated from Barnard College in, I want to say, in 1928. She didn't complete her education till then because, she had to work. And she'd been essentially going to work for on a daily basis since she was around 13 or 14 years old. But she clearly had a genius for writing. Beginning in the 1930s, she began publishing a lot more. She published 4 novels, a couple of works of folklore collections. She published numerous short stories. She published plays. She won a Guggenheim Fellowship to go to Haiti to study Haitian culture. She's just a really remarkable person. Also looking forward to reading her autobiography and learning even more about her. But Their Eyes Were Watching God is considered Zora Neal Hurston's masterpiece. This is the first Zora Neal Hurston novel I've read, and I can tell you it seems like a masterpiece to me. So essentially in the novel we follow Janie, an attractive young African-American woman with beautiful hair, in her attempts to break being out of the really narrow frame in which African American women were expected to live their lives. Her grandmother's obsessed with Janie getting married, and she marries Janie off to a man with property. She has to overcome her first husband then, the man with property, with acreage. She has to overcome his expectations that she's just essentially going to be a domestic worker in his house, that's her role, is to do all this work and to submit to him and what he thinks is best. She leaves that husband and she follows a young man who just stops by her husband's farm one day, and she follows him off, and eventually she follows him to Eatonville, the real town in Florida where Zora Neal Hurston actually grew up. And it appears as though that marriage is going to satisfy her need for fulfillment, her need to have in her own life, her need for adventure. But come to find out, her second husband really just wants her more as a trophy, something to display, something that's a mark of his status. He's somewhat abusive, and he and Janie have a falling out before he dies. And then Janie takes up with Tea Cake. Tea Cake is essentially her third husband, and he's younger than she is. By the time Janie and Tea Cake get together, I believe Janie's in her 40s, and I think Tea Cake is in his mid to late 20s. And Tea Cake is a character. He is fun-loving, and he likes to gamble, and he's good at playing the guitar. And in the beginning, you're not sure whether or not Tea Cake's intentions towards Janie are entirely honorable. Janie's second husband left her with a significant amount of money, and you're seriously at times concerned that that's what Tea Cake is really interested in, is Janie's money. But over time you kind of learn to trust that Tea Cake really loves Janie, and that he provides Janie with that thing that she was missing, that sense of acceptance and love, someone who truly cares for her, and a sense of adventure. Tea Cake allows Janie to have fun, to express herself. Tea Cake isn't concerned when Janie is better at him, than certain things. But in the end, her relationship with Tea Cake ends tragically, and she returns back to Eatonville, ready to live out the rest of her life, essentially alone with her memories, because she had, in her opinion, I think, experienced life finally with Tea Cake. And no matter the fact that that relationship was over, she would always have those memories of her life with Tea Cake and what she considered to be a real life. There's one thing in the book that I found to be somewhat troubling, and that is at one point in the section where Janie is married to Tea Cake, he beats her. Not, this sounds ridiculous, not severely, but he clearly is physically violent with her, and she accepts this, and Janie kind of continues to love Tea Cake. And I don't know how to read that. I think that Hurston includes it in the novel because that Tea Cake's ability or capacity for violence is kind of a part of the plot later on. But it just seems out of character for Janie to essentially take that beating and not to say anything back, not to do anything about it, not to react at all. So I found that a little bit disturbing, and I'm not sure I understand why Hurston had that episode in the book, other than, like I said, that perhaps it's a plot device. I will say also, if you're thinking of reading it, that Hurston is kind of an anthropologist, and so one of the things she wants to do in Their Eyes Were Watching God is to capture the African American Southern idiom and the way in which African American people spoke. And so, kind of like you will find in Twain, words are not spelled the way words are really spelled. They're spelled the way, or in dialogue at least, the words are spelled the way in which it sounded when people said them. This is great, in all honesty, and it gives a lot of authenticity to the book. But it does slow you down in reading, which is fine. And it is something you have to kind of work your way into. There are a couple of things in Their Eyes Were Watching God that I just thought were kind of extraordinary. So this is the first two paragraphs of the first chapter. Ships in a distance have every man's wish on board. For some they come in with the tide. For others they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing until the watcher turns his eyes away in resignation, his dreams mocked to death by time. That is the life of men. Now, women forget all those things they don't want to remember, and remember everything they don't want to forget. The dream is the truth. Then they act and do things accordingly. I think that passage clearly indicates the theme of the book, and the theme of the book is that women are not allowed to have the same dreams and goals as men. And I think further, Hurston intends to imply that African American women don't have the same, aren't given the same license to dream and to want a better life, and to, seek fulfillment on their own. And I think that's really what Janie is doing in this book. And there's some beautiful imagery in Their Eyes Were Watching God. So this is the first paragraph from chapter 2. Janie saw her life like a great tree in leaf, with the things suffered, the things enjoyed, things done and undone. Dawn and doom was in the branches. So this kind of tree metaphor and blossoming and hope and doom will be repeated several times during the book. Just as Janie is kind of coming into her womanhood, Hurston describes her in this passage. She was stretched on her back beneath the pear tree, soaking in the alto chant of the visiting bees, the gold of the sun, and the panting breath of the breeze, when the inaudible voice of it all came to her. She saw a dust-bearing bee sink into the sanctum of a bloom, the thousand sister calyxes arch to meet the love embrace, and the ecstatic shiver of the tree from root to tiniest branch, creaming in every blossom and frothing with delight. So this was marriage. She had been summoned to behold a revelation. Then Janie felt a pain remorseless sweet that left her limp and languid. So Janie is going to kind of seek fulfillment in her life through marriage, and what she's looking for is that kind of marriage described in that scene. Something naturally beautiful, something that caused a revelation, physical, spiritual revelation, that would shake her from head to toe. That's kind of what she's looking for. And in a sense, that's what she finds in Tea Cake near the end of the book. But I did want to talk to you about one other element of Their Eyes Were Watching God, and that is a hurricane that's described. Having gone through Hurricane Harvey a couple years ago, and having gone through Hurricane Ike and Rita, and I can't even remember the name of the other hurricanes I've gone through where I live, I have to admit that particularly in regard to Hurricane Harvey and its impact here on the Texas coast, I have to admit that the description of the hurricane came a little close to home, particularly that kind of worry when a hurricane's coming about whether or not you should evacuate. And then once you decide not to evacuate, the kind of almost immediate regret that can settle. That kind of tension, that kind of worry, that kind of regret, that kind of feeling like at some point you wish you'd gone, that was really brought home to me by Their Eyes Were Watching God and the description of the hurricane in that. So anyway, that's my review of Their Eyes Were Watching God. Hopefully I can edit this together in a way that makes sense. But as always, let me know what you think in the comment section, and thanks for watching.